A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not. I did not trade arms for hostages. And my best intentions, but the facts and the evidence, but the facts and the evidence, but the facts and the evidence, evidence.
The Cold War, the clash between two different belief systems and countries that refused to work together. The U.S., being a capitalism giant, attempted to prohibit the spread of communism. This clash started after World War II, when the U.S. disagreed in the Potsdam Conference in the summer of 1945. This conference discussed whether the Soviet Union could take possession of Poland. Due to this disagreement, President Truman suspended the Lend-Lease Act, which stated that the U.S. could sell, lease, transfer, or exchange arms with other countries. And finally, in 1947, President Truman launched the Truman Doctrine, which attempted to battle communism in third world countries by transferring money. These elements sparked an ongoing tension between the U.S. and Soviet Union that spread throughout the world, forcing countries to pick and choose what form of government they'd accept. At the close of the 1940s, this war not only opened up growing resentment, but also multiple proxy wars across the world, based off of who was or who wasn't for communism. At the end of the Cold War, these proxy wars amounted to 73. Out of 73 of these wars, the U.S. was involved in 63. And of those 63, 39 of them were won. As communism spread throughout Europe, Asia, and Latin America, the U.S. intervened or supported the side that, in no way, supported communism. Of one of the many proxy wars, one stands out as the beginning of a series of intergovernmental problems. This ended up being the Nicaraguan Civil War. In 1978 to 1979, a group that went by the name Sandinista National Liberation Front, also known as the FSLN, overthrew the Somoza dictator Ignacio Dabale. This dictator was not only responsible for the torturous acts that occurred in his country, but also for the lack of relief his citizens suffered through. For instance, when the country was struck by a 6.2 earthquake, he refused to give the money received by humanitarian groups to those who lost their homes and possessions, and instead kept it for himself. However, by the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s, Dabale's lack of rulership wasn't the only problem that needed dealing with. In 1981, Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States. After tensions with the Soviet Union grew, Reagan's inauguration became a symbol of a rightward shift in American politics due to the apprehension towards communism. Early into his presidency, Reagan started openly endorsing right-wing rebel groups in Nicaragua called Contras. These Contras would allow the U.S. open access to Nicaragua, which would serve as a launching pad for the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba. However, due to a news article story on U.S. intervention in Nicaragua, Representative Edward Boland decided to propose an amendment that restricted the money flow to Nicaragua. After several revisions of the amendment, money was completely cut off to the Nicaraguan Contras, and it made it impossible for the U.S. to legally intervene. The Boland Amendment was one of many steps made to separate the United States from world affairs, until trouble began in the Middle East. During the Lebanese Civil War, kidnappings of Americans and Western Europeans became common. After the kidnapping of 52 hostages, the U.S.'s relationship with Iran was severely severed. Most of the kidnappings were by Hezbollah terrorists who hoped to gain political leverage. After Ronald Reagan was inaugurated, these terrorists decided to strategically let go several hostages they had in order to gain favor from Reagan. Unfortunately for them, Ronald Reagan refused to negotiate with them, even after they offered up the recent 7 American hostages they were holding. Ronald Reagan then launched Operation Staunch. This operation became an enforced arms embargo on Iran in 1983 that was encouraged worldwide. Reagan hoped this embargo would stop the conflict between Iraq and Iran while also decreasing the amount of hostage situations. But he was wrong. Despite numerous efforts to relieve countries of U.S. intervention, an article by a Lebanese magazine revealed a deal between America and Iran. After the article spread, President Reagan denied any relation with Iran until they confessed to its association in dealings with the U.S. Not only did Reagan lie, but he was associated with the destruction of evidence. After the scandal was revealed, President Reagan admitted that he broke the arms embargo on Iran and sent 1,500 missiles in exchange for $30 million in 5 hostages. Out of the $30 million that was paid, the U.S. government only received $12 million. The remaining $18 million was found to be given to the Nicaraguan Contras in order to fund their movement. After this was discovered, President Reagan established the Tower Commission to examine the situation. Instead of holding Reagan responsible, the commission called into question his administration, mainly the White House Chief of Staff, Donald T. Reagan, for giving poor advice. As a result, Reagan was absolved and numerous people were specifically blamed for the incident. For example, a prime suspect was Oliver North, who was put through trial, convicted for obstructing Congress and unlawfully destroying government documents, and given 3 years of imprisonment, along with 1,200 hours of community service. However, in the chaos of the situation, a vital piece of his testimony was missed. He stated that he was assured that President Reagan was aware of this deal and even supported it. Unfortunately, he was unable to provide substantial proof, and it was soon forgotten after his commanding officers assured the court that Reagan was purposely shielded from the issue. In 1989, when George H.W. Bush became president, he removed North's convictions, saying he acted strictly out of patriotism. As far as the others involved, most of their convictions were overturned, and President Bush established presidential pardons. Finally, by 1991, the Cold War had ended. Not only had the Iron Curtain and Berlin Wall fell, but also the Soviet Union. McCarthyism died down, as well as the support for NASA. The Iran Contra affair became old news, and America moved on to what seemed to be bigger and better things.